What do you guys want to do?
Whatever you want to do.
Oh boy.
Your choice.
Let's roll with it.
You're back on it.
All right. We're going to roll with it. All right. The camera's rolling now. If any of you have been watching my series on the book of Revelation, I've been on this series for 2.5 years now. I'm on part 670 something. Who just told me that they started back on show 1 and they're going to be caught up in 6 months? Was that was you?
I started a few months ago.
You started a few months ago.
I caught it in the middle, and I was like, wait a minute, I gotta go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm about 600.
That's actually a good way to do it. Yeah. So, and again, the reason I did this was because I wanted to make more popular an excellent book, the best book I believe ever written on the book of Revelation by A. Enoch, who was the compiler of the Concordant version, called The Unveiling of Jesus Christ. And you know, all of us suspect, I mean, we can't, use this for any kind of practical way, but we suspect something's up. I mean, everybody realizes that the world has just been exponentially increasing, complexity, problems, technology, everything's coming to a crescendo. All you need to realize that is to look at the previous 6,000 years of humanity, and you'll find out that in 1860 we were still riding horses. In 1860 we're still riding horses, and in the last 150 years we've progressed incredibly. So it tells you that we're on a crash course for something. Now, that doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying that's anecdotal evidence. I can't use that to prove anything to you. But let me tell you something about God. And I don't know, I'm 8 shows ahead, so I don't think with the information I'm going to give you right now, I don't believe that you've heard this. Because I think it's in shows that you will hear this coming week. But I'm giving you the inside scoop. God is not a date setter. God never sets dates. And I, Martin Zender, will not set a date. I have not set a date. I cannot set a date because Jesus Christ himself said no one knows the day or the hour. But he didn't say month or year, did he? Now see, I go this way, why not? No man knows the day or the hour. So then we make an assumption, as many people do in Scripture, therefore the month or the year can't be known, or the season can't be known. And yet how strange that Jesus chided Israel for not recognizing the hour of his appearing, and then he told them concerning his future appearing that they should look. You see the sky at night and you say, oh, there's going to be a storm. You can read the fig trees. You can read all this, and yet you can't read the signs of the times. That tells me that there are signs of the times. God is not a date setter, but he is a day counter. I'll say that again. God is not a date setter, but he's a day counter. He marks the passage of time. And that's the key to this thing, is the passage of time. And what if, ladies and gentlemen, what if there is an unbroken chronology in the Scriptures from the creation of Adam to the present day? What if God made sure that there was a way to count the days, the years, and thus the days from Adam? I'll tell you why I think that's important. Now, we're talking about the second coming of Christ. Let's talk now about the first coming of Christ in humiliation. God wanted some people to know when he was coming to earth, when the Messiah was to be born. How do I know this? Daniel chapter 9. God sends a celestial messenger named Gabriel to a man living in captivity in Babylon by the name of Daniel. And he gives that man the number of years until the coming of Messiah. He says, I have marked out 77s of years for your people Israel to end lawlessness, to bring a consummation to your hopes and dreams and expectations. I'm paraphrasing here, but why did God mention specific 70 times 7? That's a math problem, folks, isn't it? Is that a math problem? So you do have to do the math. God's not going to put it on a silver platter and just... He never does that. God never does that. That's why I say that the Christians get their doctrine through the fast food window. They don't even look at it. They just take whatever they give you through McDonald's. You know, you order, take a fries, cheeseburger, you get it, you go. Who looks to see if they have it? Some people do, I know. And so people just take things for there. But God has a way, if you do the math, that Israel would have known the coming of Messiah. Because watch what he does. 7 times 7 is 400. 7 times 70 is 490. I know primitive math. That's as far as I can go. And he split the times in two. The first, there was 69 sevens and 1 7. He split it in two, the 70 sevens. There's going to be 69 sevens, which itself would consist, I should write this on a board, of 7 sevens and 62 sevens. This is a whole nother talk. And there would be 1 remaining 7, which is interesting, because the first 69 sevens have come to pass. The last 7 is still future, which is interesting. I wonder if God knew what he was doing when he split those times up. Anyway, but there's a trick involved with computing these years. God was giving Israel a help. He was giving Daniel a help, and he put it in the scriptures. And so any Jew who had their scroll of Daniel, anybody who really wanted to know, really cared about the Messiah, gave a crap, wanted to know when he was coming, as opposed to the drive-through people. And there were those people in Israel's day too. They just wanted to hear what their priest had to say. But there were people who, let's look at Daniel. They're at night, you know, and they got the lamp lit, and they're at the kitchen table, and they're looking at Daniel, like us, like we do. After this is over, we're going to go to the hotel this evening, and we're going to do more of this with each other. You know, we're going to talk, because we care. We're opening the scrolls. And if you wanted to know, you could say, well, okay, it says 490 years. But, you know, if you're living in an era that was beyond 490 years, obviously there's more than 490 years between the time Daniel got this prophecy and the time of the first coming of Christ. Oh, but they made another interesting discovery, that God does not mark time while Israel is in apostasy or under duress, under occupation. And so, what do you know? God lists the number of years that Israel was under occupation of the nations. And so if you subtract those years, it all works out. I'm really just going over it lightly for the sake of time and for the sake of everything else I want to say in this talk. So, but it all works out. There's a way. And now we know that Israel is in a giant time of apostasy where God hardened their heart. They crucified their Messiah. That was really bad. That was an apostate thing to do. And so the temple veil was rent, and God was done with Israel for the eon. That stopped the clock. When that temple veil went like this, you took a stopwatch and went, that stopped it at the end of 483 years. Now, the 483 years, the first 69 sevens, would come to a completion from the time that a king named Artaxerxes put out a decree in Babylon for Nehemiah to go back to Jerusalem. From the time of that decree, this is what Gabriel told Daniel, from the time of that decree to the coming of Christ is 490 years. That's what bookmarked. The two events bookmarked the beginning of the 483 years, the first 69 sevens, and the last. And the two events were the decree. Why he picked that, who knows? He's God. On the day that Artaxerxes writes a decree and gives it to Nehemiah, who's one of the captives in Babylon. It says, you have my permission to return to your patriarchy and rebuild the temple, like it's your heart's desire to do. On the day that happened, the clock started. There's a stop. From that day until the coming governor, capital G, 69 sevens, 483 years. All he had to do was count the passage of days. God didn't set a date. He didn't say Messiah's going to come in 3 BC as the Romans reckon time. No, he said it's going to be this many days, because this is why, because that is true irrespective of whether you're using the Gregorian calendar or the Jewish calendar, right? The passage of days doesn't care what calendar you're using. This because of the sun. The sun doesn't care what our calendars say. Well, it does. Sun does this thing. The sky don't lie. So that's what keeps track of the days. In the Jewish calendar, there's 360 days to a year, not 365. That's called the solar calendar. So these were the two events. And this is why in Israel, at the time of Christ, there were people who knew that he was coming. Now, here's my question. Tell me if you think this is a smart question. My question is, why would God give a period of years if he didn't want them to know the time? Is it a game? Is it a cruel twist? Is it just, I'm going to really mess them up, man. I'm going to really show them my power. I'm going to give them these random numbers, and they're going to think that it means something when nobody knows when I'm going to do what. I never announce my plans. And they're going to see these numbers and go, "Ooh, we have numbers. We can." It's all just to frustrate them. God doesn't do that, because He does tell His secrets to His friends. Yes, He does. Now, if this is what God does for the first coming of Christ, do you really think that there would not be a way to know when the second coming of Christ would be here? Because I suggest to you that the second coming of Christ is better than the first. I know He laid the groundwork in the first coming of Christ for everything that He would do, but I'm tired of seeing Him get spit on. I'm tired of that scene. I'm tired of the spear in the heart. I'm tired of nobody believing Him. I'm tired of the people trying to throw Him off the cliff. Sick of that. What I want to see is Him coming back in glory. And so does all Israel. And so He gives us. But this time, it's not marked by a period of... It's a dual thing, because the last 7 years of Daniel's prophecy remains. And Paul gives us a secret of that in Romans 11:25. And that Israel won't be completed until the body of Christ is completed. Israel won't be back in God's timetable until the body of Christ comes in. Romans 11:25. Okay, but God has a different system now of marking time. It's not the 690 years, even though that's a part of it. He now counts days from Adam. And this is, I find this fascinating, and those of you who've been listening to the series, you've heard this. Why is it that in Genesis 5, the Bible is one of the most boring books you could ever read. It's horrible, because all those genealogies are listed. And Seth lived to be 505 years, and he had this, and he begat this, and he begat. Everybody makes fun of the begats. And you have all these years mentioned. Adam lived 935 years, and then Seth lived this, and Methuselah lived this, and then Noah came, and he lived this. It's like, who cares? Ah, my friends, what if all these numbers are a way to calculate days? And then there's time bridges. And then we know that Abraham was born, and the only year I care about now is from Adam. I want to know how many years we are from Adam. This is a cool time thing. Nobody knows about that. Everybody knows about BC and AD, but I like this inside information. How about FA? What year are we FA? What's that? Secret information. How many years are we from Adam? We're 5989. We're in that year. It's not 2017. I don't even think of this as 2017 anymore. I don't care about 2017. I care about 5989. That's how many years there have been from Adam. How do we know that? Because not only did God give us a time, we can know that Abraham was born like 1,940 years from Adam. We can know it with a freaking calculator. This many years, this many guys, this guy had this guy, he lived this many years, oh. Abraham was born 1,948 years from Adam. Then what happened, And then we take up with the kings of Israel. Boy, is that boring. You want to stab yourself when you read about the kings of Israel and their reigns, and the reign of this guy of Jehoiakim, and the reign of Elias, the reign of all these people, and they list the years. But that is a time bridge that picks up where Abraham and these guys left off, and so the time God builds a time bridge. He makes sure you have a little tinker toy that connects this building with the next building, and you have your tinker toy connector. Don't you hate that when you get something? You get your toys out and you're supposed to have a connector. I had to buy this connector thing for this camera. Without it, I couldn't connect the microphone to the camera. So we know how many years from this to this. We know how many years, but where's the connector? God provides another time bridge, and He connects the time. And I will have the audacity to say to you that there is a continuous unbroken chronology, so that we may, those of us who care, calculate the number of days from Adam. Why is that important? Okay. I won't even get to Acts. Luke. I was going to get to Luke 3 and 4. This is why. In Hebrews, you probably heard this. Paul says there remains. I'm not going to go there, but you'll find it. Read Hebrews. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Paul says, if Joshua, who led Israel into the wilderness, if Joshua had given them a true rest, then there wouldn't have been talk of a future rest. But Paul says there still remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. He wrote that in 68 AD or whatever. What is that future rest for Israel? Do we know? What is it? It's the millennium. It's the 1,000 years. That's the Sabbath rest that remains for Israel. And then Paul does an amazing thing in Hebrews. He ties the coming Sabbath rest back to Genesis. And he says that just as God worked for 6 days to create the world and rested on the seventh, thus also there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. That's another important link. Paul is drawing on Genesis on the 6 days, 1 day, and he's applying it in a millennium way. He's applying it the same 6-1 ratio, right? 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, and he's extrapolating, Paul is, and he's saying there remains a huge Sabbath rest. And we know from Revelation 5:10 or whatever it is, and they will reign with Christ for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Wow. What that tells us is God might be giving us a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that just as the earth was reconstructed in 6 days, followed by 1 day of stopping, I say rest, but the Hebrew says stopping, thus also, in the bigger picture, there's 6 days of 1,000 years, 6,000 years, and then in the 7,000th year, 7 being the number of perfection, the number of the fulfillment of a cycle, God brings in the millennium. How perfect is that? Adam was created on day 6. 6 is the number of man. The Antichrist number is 666. If you look in Scripture, 6 is associated with the man and the works of man. Man and the works of man. Finally, the works of man stops, and the works of man stop, and God takes over. And so, it's a beautiful thing. So is this. Did you know that Jesus Christ came 4,000 years from Adam? Here's a key verse. Psalm 90, verse 4. For to God, 1,000 years is as a day, or as a watch in the night. Psalm 90, verse 4. Write that one down. 2 Peter 3:8 also. To God, 1,000 years is as a day. In other words, God doesn't measure time as we do. But we're getting a clue. God could have said anything. He could have said, 14 million years is like 10 minutes to me. He could have said that, right? The point he's making is, I don't measure time like you measure time. He could have said it that way, but he said 1,000 years is as a day or as a watch in the night. There were 4 watches in the night in Israel. Remember that one passage in the Gospels where Jesus came walking to them on the water on the 4th watch of the night. 4 watches of the night. There's been darkness since Adam. Between Adam and Christ, there were 4 watches of the night. 4,000 years. Christ came 4,000 years from Adam. That's interesting. The first temple was 3,000 years, on the dot. 3,000 years from Adam, the first temple came. 3,000 years after that, the next temple comes. Because that's 6,000 years fulfilled. And the 7,000th year begins the kingdom. Do you know what the number 8 is? 8 is the number of a new beginning. 8 is the number of Christ. 888. If you look at all the multiples, you'll find Christ all through it. If you look at Bullinger on numbers. 8 people came through the flood. 8 is the number of a new beginning. So the 8,000th year begins the new heavens and the new earth. If this, what we're seeing, is true. Does that make sense? The 8,000th year begins the new heavens and the new earth. Very intriguing. Mr. Knock writes about this in Concordance Studies in the book of Daniel. It's called the 7,000-year plan of God. And he says that this is really attractive, he says. This is attractive. This appeals to me. I like it. It makes complete sense. He knows the numbers, and 6 is the number of man, 7 the number of God, 8 the number of a new beginning. Knock liked it. But he said, but I can't really say anything about it. We can't really, because it's not stated. In other words, God doesn't come out and say, I have a 6,000 year, all you got to do is count 6,000 years from Adam, and then you'll know when the kingdom, when man's work's done and the kingdom comes. See, if he had said that, then we can say, there's the verse, it's definitive. But he doesn't. So Knox says, therefore, I can't say definitely that this is the situation, but I really like it. But you know what? God doesn't announce anywhere that Joseph is a type of Christ. Never says, oh, by the way, Joseph is a type of Christ. When you read the Joseph story, think of Jesus. There's a lot of parallels. Doesn't say that. But since we have brains, and since God does this, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, oh, Joseph, perfect type of Christ. So I'm being bold these days and coming out with this because other men have done this work. This isn't my genius. Other people have been talking about this 7,000-year plan for a long time. But I just don't see it being published. I see it written in books that are archaic, that nobody knows exist. They're out of print, some of them, right? And so I feel that I'm supposed to be publishing this and putting myself out there. I'm really putting myself out there, but I will tell you tonight why 2028. You know, now listen, folks, if 2028, it has to happen sometime. And this explains why we're waiting for 6,000 years from Adam to expire. If that's the simple truth, that it has to be 6,000 years from Adam. This explains why every single so-called prediction of end times has been wrong. Because nobody's been 6,000 years from Adam yet. Simple. Why did the prophecy of 1948 fail? Because it wasn't 6,000 years from Adam yet. Why did the prophecy of 1870 whatever fail? Because it wasn't 6,000 years. Why did Hal Lindsey, who said the rapture was going to happen in 1988, why didn't that come? Because it wasn't 6,000 years from Adam. The person who gets the year right, the 6,000 years from Adam, that person is going to be a genius. Because that's when it is. So if you're a kindergartner and you're going, it's this year because this is 6,000 years from Adam. You're right. Ding, 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 ding. What does you win, Johnny? Right? Because that's it. That's why nothing else has been true. And so.
Question?
Yes, it's time for question and answer. I think I've exhausted myself for this time. Don't worry, I'll recharge.
That 6,000 years, is that solar years or is that Jewish calendar?
Solar years. The Jewish calendar is completely wrong. If you look on the internet and you search Jewish calendar, they will tell you that we're 5,700 and something years from Adam. They're 213 years.
There's 360 days in a Jewish year, am I correct?
I don't know. I just know God's reckoning the time. I don't know. But yeah, the Jewish calendar, which is no big surprise. I mean, I hate to say this, it's going to sound racist, but it's just a fact. The Jews are wrong about a lot of things when it comes to God. Seriously, they missed it by a mile. Not racist or anything, it's just the facts. So I would not exactly trust a Jewish calendar. Brought to you by the people who crucified their Messiah.
The reason I ask is I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and these prophecies of Daniel are pivotal to the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. Except they make the days of Daniel's prophecies, the 1,260 days, the 2,300 days, they make those years, not days.
Yeah, well.
But Knock goes back and says those are days.
Yes, those are days.
Yeah, so that 1,260 days is actually 1/2 of 1/7. And if you work that out,
believe me, folks, the numbers are perfect. And listen, I'm not telling you that the 6 days of creation were 6,000 years. I'm not telling you that at all. They were 6 solar days. There was a morning and an evening. That's how we know that, measured by the sun. There was a morning and an evening the first day. There was a morning and an evening the second day. That's how we know. They were actual literal days. I'm not telling you that, oh, God created the earth in 6,000 years. No. But that becomes a model. 6 and 1, that becomes a template. It becomes a model for us to do what Paul does in Hebrews, extrapolate and say, what if we can take the 6-1 ratio and keep using it? And God does that himself, right? I repeat, he takes 6 days, 1 day of rest. He takes he uses that for the week now as a standard in Israel. That's how we got our week. That's why we're on the weekend now, because of what God did in the Garden of Eden. That's why this is a weekend. How do you know? How do we know a week ends? How do we know? Can't days just go on? No, because the system started with the sun and the moon. And God's been winding that clock, and it's been consistent every day of every year since Adam. Consistent. Wow. That tells me that God never stops doing what he's doing, and he's serious about this day thing. Because it keeps happening. And if anybody's wise, they will look at God's past and be able to see what he's going to do in the future. It has to do with the passage of days. And so...
You know what, the really great thing about this is 2028 is great, but we're snatched away before then.
Yes, we'll get to that tonight. I realize now. We're going to be snatched away before that. Before that, right. But going on, the sabbatical year, every 7 years, right, they rested 1 year. So they went 6 years, they did their crops, and then the 7th year, they lay the land fallow, right? So we're using, again, the 6-1, except now it's in years, right? And then we have the Jubilee year.
That's right.
Oh, it keeps going 6 and 1, and then so why should we think it an unusual, strange leap to say that, does this apply to millennia? Why think in terms of millennia? Because God clearly states, another time clue, that the rest of Israel is 1,000 years in length. And there he is in Psalm 90 verse 4, days like 1,000 years like a day. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Put that together with Daniel, count the days, boom, somebody's going to get it right. Bingo. Are there any other bingos? No. There are no other bingos.
It's very significant, too, that the wisest man who ever lived, Solomon, repeats over and over, there is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun.
You know what? That's actually comforting. I used to be discouraged by that verse. Nothing new under the sun. Dang, I want something new. Not really. No, all I can handle is the old stuff, man. Even the old stuff. I don't want anything. No, I don't want any surprises. Keep the routine going. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Like you say, God's in a great, big, predictable, wonderful rut.
Yeah, big, fat, hairy, glorious, predictable rut. God is in a big rut. Yeah.
Well, the 8,000th year will be the new heavens and
That's exactly right.
Well, does that coincide with the idea of an 8th day? We've only known 7 days. The 8th day is a new day.
Yeah.
Because we're adding a day that we haven't had before.
I actually think that new heavens and new earth has nothing to do with the old system. When he says a new earth, new creation, I think that the 6-1 thing has fulfilled its duty, it's done its work, and now we're done with that. That's the last 6-1 thing we're going to do. Trash that. Put it in a museum. Don't trash it. Put it in a museum. And now we're going to do a completely new thing that has nothing to do with 6 days and 1, right? That's the new heavens and the new earth. And how awesome that it starts in the 8th millennium. What this tells you is we think this stuff's going on forever. It's like, it's forever. How long is God going to be? You realize it's just a matter of passage of days. And when you realize that, it's like, oh my. This thing's not crazy out of control. It's just tick, tick, tick. And when that odometer kicks over, that's it. Boom, it's done. No mystery. No, when is it going to end? I can't think it. No, it's going to end here. I've known that from the beginning. We'll just count however 360 times 6,000, boom, boom, boom. It's going to end then. Don't mind. I mean, I know exactly when it's going to end. And to me, it's just 6 days. To me, to God, if 1,000 years is a day, then that's 6,000 years we've been sweating through, of which we've only been alive for what? 40, 50, 60, 70 years? In your case, 19. Seems long to us, but God, that's like 6 days to me. That's like your week. It's nothing to me. This thing is so surely going to happen. So surely going to happen. There is a day. And if we don't know it, I think we're stupid. I think we're stupid if we don't know it. That's why I'm not willing to be stupid. So I'm putting my chips on this square, you know. I am. I'm putting my chips on this square because I don't want to be stupid. I don't want to be say, Zender, you saw it. You put it together. All these people were saying it, and you were afraid you were a chicken. You were afraid to say it because everybody else is wrong. People are going to make fun of you. Zender's setting dates. Don't say it. If we don't know this, we're stupid. God's not going to give us the time of His second coming to those who have inquiring minds.
So what you're saying is that Christ said specifically hour and day.
Right.
Specifically, He meant literally hour and day because, like you said,
that's what I think. Yeah.
Just say, well, they generalize and say, well, they stretch that out to months and years and,
right.
and decades.
And I think they have.
It applied to specifically what He said, hour and day.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And plus, it would make no sense otherwise, because He's warning them to watch for signs.
Right.
So signs of what? What is the example He gives is the fig. The fig doesn't operate on you can't tell what day the fig's going to get ripe. You know by the season. Oh, it's spring, therefore the fig's going to do this. Oh, it's fall, the fig's going to do this. Oh, it's summer, now we do this with our crops. Oh, it's fall, now we do this. It's not hour. What hour do you plant the seed? It's what season do you plant the seed? I plant my seed in the spring. No farmer says I plant my seed at 2 p.m. on June 2nd, unless they're crazy fanatical scientists or whatever. I don't know. Nobody does that, you know. So this is exciting. I hate to say it's not exciting because every day's the same anyway. But it's interesting. Let's put it that way, because that means it sounds far away, 2028. But think about it.
Not snatching.
This means that the tribulation starts in 2021. This is 2017, and we're halfway through it. I believe that the tribulation starts in the spring of 2021. The midpoint of the tribulation would be October of 24. Kingdom comes in spring of 28. And we are in the summer of 2017, and we also have an astrological sign coming up on September 23rd, which is exactly 3.5 years. Interestingly, this is my original research, which is exactly this constellation you've probably heard people talking about all over the internet that happens on September 23rd of this year. It's exactly 3.5 years from the spring of 2021. And that means that there's 3.5 year periods. This is me talking. This is original research now. There's 3.5 year periods. 2 in the last 7 years of Daniel's prophecy, and 1 before it, where the 144,000 are prepared. This is me. That's me talking. You know, I'm not putting all my chips on that square, but I think it's intriguing, and I will present it as intriguing. Maybe I'll get to that on Sunday. Maybe I'll just dedicate the rest of this conference to this. I don't know. But I do need to talk about Luke 3 and 4. Okay, well, we're at dinner time now, so you all have been very good to me here, paying attention. Been a good class. I'll tell you what we're going to do. You know, we're going to have cookies, milk and cookies for you after. All right, what's the dinner plans?
Pretty much like lunch.
Pretty much like, yeah, you can shut her down. Thank you.